When a man is crazy about you, it's not the things he says that will shock you. It's the things he does without saying a single word. The first sign that he's deeply, irrationally backwards and emotionally invested in you lies not in his declarations, but in the subtle patterns of his behavior backwards. These patterns often appear quiet on the surface, but if you watch closely, they're thunderously loud words. It all begins with the instinctive act of mirroring words. You'll notice his posture shifts when you shift yours. If you cross your arms words, he might unconsciously do the same. If your voice softens, so does his. If you begin to get excited words, so does he. He's not mimicking you on purpose. It's his subconscious trying to connect words. When a man mirrors your energy, your pacing, your laughter, your emotional rhythm words, he's sending a signal. It means you've entered his nervous system. It's how humans bond backwards. And when a man is emotionally drawn to you, he wants to align himself with your world words. That alignment is not about control. It's about closeness. You'll see it in the way he responds to your mood shifts words, how he senses the subtle changes in your tone. He'll start texting the way you do. If you use emojis words, he starts using them. If you write long messages, he starts matching your length. It may seem trivial, but it isn't. He's calibrating his frequency to yours words. You're not just a person he likes anymore. You've become the emotional compass that he quietly orbits words. But mirroring is only the surface. There's something even deeper presence backwards when a man is obsessed with you in a way that consumes him emotionally. He doesn't just spend time with you. He inserts himself into your time words. You'll find him showing up where you least expect. Smells backwards. He'll start participating in your interests, even if they're completely foreign to him words. You could be into books he's never read, music he's never liked words, or hobbies he's never tried. Yet suddenly he's curious. Not because he wants to change who he is backwards, but because being involved in your world gives him a sense of emotional access to you words. Your passions become his portals. It's his way of learning your language words. And he's not doing it for show, he's doing it to connect. Presence becomes his silent way of saying words. I want to live where you live, emotionally and mentally. That kind of presence isn't logical words. It doesn't always make sense. He may spend hours with you doing nothing just to absorb your energy. And he won't rush to leave. Even when the night is over or the call is ending, he'll linger backwards. That extra pause, that moment where he doesn't want to hang up or walk away, is not accidental words. It's an emotional attachment expressing itself physically words. And then comes the tension he creates, often not even realizing he's doing it words. When a man is crazy about you, He starts testing for your emotional response. Words. He might tease you a bit more, push your buttons just slightly, or challenge your opinions in a playful way. This isn't manipulation, it's emotional exploration. Words. He wants to know how you feel about him, but instead of asking, he gauges your reactions. Words. If he notices that a joke made you laugh, he'll repeat it. If he sees you jealous over something he said, he'll mentally take note. It's his way of checking. Words. Do I affect you the way you affect me? This creates a kind of emotional call and response. Words. He throws something out, not to hurt, but to provoke, and watches to see what returns. Words. This pattern is dangerous if misread. Some women take it as games or confusion. Backwards. But it's not confusion, it's hunger for confirmation. Backwards. A man who is invested deeply will not always have the emotional vocabulary to say, backwards, I'm afraid of how much I feel for you. So instead, he'll watch your cues. Backwards. He'll measure your silences. He'll study your eyes when someone else walks into the room. Words. He'll read between your laughs. His emotional mirror is no longer just physical, it becomes intuitive. Intuitive. Words. He begins to emotionally sync with you, to feel your fluctuations. Words. And even the smallest withdrawal from your side becomes a storm in his world. Words. Silence becomes louder than any conversation. This is perhaps the most overlooked pattern. Words. When you stop texting him like you used to, he feels it like a gut punch. When you become less available, words, he starts spiraling. He won't say it, but he'll act on it. He might text randomly backwards, just to see if you still respond the same way. He may suddenly bring up memories, words, trying to re-anchor your emotional presence. If your laughter fades in his life, backwards, he starts chasing echoes. That's what happens when someone becomes your emotional dependency. Whilst his security is now tied to your attention, not your approval, not your body, your attention, backwards. That is the rarest form of obsession, when a man is hooked not on having you, but on being seen by you, words. And when he's no longer sure he's being seen, he doesn't feel safe, backwards. That safety is what drives his next behavioral pattern, consistency, words. He starts becoming someone who shows up, not because he made a decision to, words, but because his emotions are running the show, backwards. He begins remembering your small details, not just your birthday or favorite color, backwards, but your food quirks, the way you sip your drink, the way you fidget when you're nervous, words. He notices when your tone sounds off, even if you say, everything's fine. That's not just interest, words. That's psychological connection. He is observing, memorizing, decoding. Because your happiness, backwards, and your comfort and your reaction to him have become the barometer for how he feels about himself, words. And that's the dangerous part. He's not in control anymore. You are, words. When a man reaches that point where your emotional state influences his emotional state, he's no longer casually interested. Words. He's psychologically invested. That kind of investment is rare. Words. Most men don't allow themselves to get there unless something in you disarms something in them. Words. And when that happens, everything changes. He begins to initiate without prompting. Words. He checks in without needing a reason. He compliments you, not because he's trying to impress backwards, but because he's compelled to. You become the center of his emotional landscape. Words. And every action he takes is a form of psychological alignment with you. Words. He doesn't just want you to be his partner. He wants you to be his mirror. Backwards. He wants to see his emotional growth reflected in your smile. His purpose mirrored in your presence. Backwards. His identity validated by your closeness. He begins to make decisions based on how they'll affect you. Backwards. He weighs opportunities, not in terms of success, but in terms of how they'll shape his time with you. Words. You start to see him evolve, become more responsible, more intentional, more grounded. Backwards. That's not because you asked him to change. Words. It's because his investment in you creates a deeper investment in himself. Words. This is the ultimate psychological loop. You inspire the growth he always wanted. Words. But never committed to until you. But here's the kicker. None of this happens with loud declarations. No over-the-top speeches. No fireworks. No grandstanding. Instead, what happens is a shift in patterns. Words. He doesn't disappear when he's overwhelmed. He reaches out. He doesn't avoid difficult conversations. He leans in. Words. He doesn't flirt for validation. He flirts for connection. Backwards. And all of this tells you something deeper than the word love ever could. Backwards. It tells you that you've altered the trajectory of his inner world. You've entered his system. Words. You've rewired his compass. And that's what it means when a man is truly crazy about you. Words. He doesn't just want you in his life. He wants you as his life. His thoughts spiral around you. Words. His decisions consult you even in your absence. Words. And his days begin and end with emotional check-ins that involve your presence, your opinion. Words. Your energy. That is the kind of obsession that no logic can explain. Words. And it never starts with a declaration. It starts with the mirroring, the presence, the silence. Words. The consistency, the detail, the rhythm, and finally, the transformation. Words. So if you're asking yourself right now, is he really into me? Stop listening to the words. Words. Start studying the pattern, because a man who's crazy about you won't leave you wondering forever. Words. He'll start acting like your heart is the only compass he trusts. And once that happens, words, your job isn't to chase him. It's to observe him. Backwards. Let his patterns reveal what his pride might be hiding because obsession doesn't hide for long, especially when it's real, when a man is truly into you. Not just physically attracted, not just casually dating, but genuinely emotionally drawn. Something strange starts to happen beneath the surface. It's not dramatic. It's not loud. It's subtle, almost invisible unless you're tuned in. But once it begins, it becomes unstoppable. Emotional investment in a woman changes how a man presents himself, not because she demands it backwards, but because his feelings override the need to perform. And this is where the second keynote becomes crucial. Emotional investment triggers vulnerability backwards, not games. Most people have been conditioned to think that men hide, withdraw, or run when they feel too much. But the truth is, when a man is emotionally ready, and he becomes crazy about a woman, he doesn't run, he reveals. Slowly, carefully, but honestly. That revealing comes in pieces. It shows up when he lets the mask drop. Not to manipulate, backwards. Not to gain sympathy, but because his heart has no other way to process what he's feeling. That's how men show love. They start letting you in where others have only been allowed to glance. Backwards. They show you the cracks. And if you're watching for the right signs, you'll see it. In fact, it begins not when he starts telling you how amazing you are, but when he starts telling you where he feels like he's not enough. That's the sacred territory, That's the place beyond seduction. That's the place where love begins. You see, backwards, it's easy for a man to talk about his wins, his job, his strengths. That's performance. That's ego, That's him maintaining the image. But when he begins to talk about the moments that made him cry, the father that left, the insecurity he carries, the rejection he never recovered from. That is vulnerability, And vulnerability is the one thing a man only shares when he feels safe, Not when he's trying to impress you, but when he trusts you, backwards. There's a moment in every emotionally real connection where the game ends. And the truth walks in, The polished version of him starts to feel heavy. He gets tired of being cool, of being mysterious, of being in control. And he begins to surrender the story. He begins to share, not the Instagram version of his life, but the backstage reality. Backwards. This is the moment where he starts letting you into his chaos. It might not come with tears, It might not even be dramatic, It might be a sentence that lands out of nowhere. I don't know if I'll ever be good enough. Or sometimes I feel like everyone leaves eventually. Or I never told anyone this, But when I was a kid, those sentences are keys. They're not just words. They're portals, He's inviting you to see him without armor. And for a man, that is a terrifying act of courage. Now here's what most people get wrong. They think vulnerability is weakness, especially in men. Backwards, we've been trained to see emotions in men as unstable, erratic, weak. But that's nonsense. In reality, emotional expression in a man is a sign of inner safety. It means he doesn't need to dominate the moment. He doesn't need to manipulate you into admiring him. He is offering you truth over image. And when that happens, you'll know. Because there's a stillness in that moment. The moment he tells you something he hasn't told anyone else. The moment his voice changes slightly, and he pauses mid-sentence like he's not sure if he should keep going. That's when you know. Backwards, this man isn't just dating you. He's opening to you. That is the ultimate compliment. Because men don't open to everyone. A man can sleep with someone, date someone, backwards. Even live with someone and still be emotionally guarded. But when he's crazy about a woman, backwards, that emotional gate doesn't just creak open. It swings backwards. And the flood of what's behind it reveals everything. That's why emotional vulnerability is not a side effect of love. It is love. Backwards. It is the bridge between desire and devotion. And when a man starts showing it, he's no longer operating from ego. He's operating from depth. And depth is where real connection begins. You'll notice he no longer avoids emotional conversations. He might not always have the words, but he won't run from the moment. Instead of deflecting, when things get serious, he leans in. Instead of distracting you with flirtation, when you get sad, he stays. His instinct shifts from escape to embrace. And it's not because he suddenly became emotionally intelligent. It's because his heart has taken over. His love for you begins overriding his programming. He stops filtering. He stops pretending. He stops managing your perception. It's ants. And he starts living in your presence. Not every man gets to this place. But when he does, backwards, the game is over. When he starts showing you his fears, not as excuses, but as confessions. He might say things like, "I'm scared I'll mess this up," or "I've never felt this way before, and it terrifies me." That's not manipulation. That's a man confronting his own internal war and letting you witness it. That's him being honest about the weight he carries. And if you're wise, you won't try to fix him. You won't try to make the moment pretty. You'll just witness him. And that witnessing is everything. Because what men fear most is not opening up. It's opening up and being dismissed. When you hold space for him, not as a therapist, but as a loving presence, he begins to realize you're not just someone he wants. You're someone he needs. Not out of weakness, but out of sacred alignment. Because when a man finds someone he can be emotionally naked with, he stops chasing distractions. starts. He stops playing roles. He starts becoming. You become his mirror for growth. You become his emotional home. And with that comes the transformation. Backwards. He begins showing up in ways he never did before. Not because you asked. Not because you demanded. Backwards. But because he wants to honor the connection that lets him be fully himself. Backwards. He starts taking accountability. He starts listening deeper. He starts checking in. Backwards. Not just about your day, but about your feelings. He starts making plans with emotional intention. Words, not just convenience. He begins asking deeper questions. He becomes curious about what you think. Backwards. How you process what shaped you. Because emotional investment creates emotional curiosity. Backwards. You're no longer just the woman he's dating. You're the woman who makes him feel seen. Backwards. And that feeling becomes addictive. Not in a toxic way, but in a healing way. Backwards. Because most men have never had that space. Most men walk around wearing armor. Backwards. Not because, but because the world taught them that emotions are liabilities. Backwards. When he finds someone who makes his emotions feel like strengths instead of weapons, his loyalty changes. Words. He's no longer just drawn to beauty. He's drawn to belonging. Backwards. And this is where so many relationships take flight or fall apart. Words. Because if a woman doesn't recognize the moment he opens up, she may dismiss it. Backwards. She may confuse his honesty for oversharing. She may see his fears as weakness. Words. She may assume he's being dramatic. And if that happens, he closes the door again. Words. Maybe not all at once, but slowly, quietly, emotionally. And he goes back to surface level interactions. Backwards, never fully trusting again. That's why emotional maturity in both people matters. Because a man who's crazy about you and shows it through his vulnerability is offering his most delicate self. And if you're wise, you'll treat that self with the care it deserves. You won't rush him. You won't interrogate him. Words. You won't label him. You'll listen. Words. Because the greatest gift you can give to a man in love is not validation. It's understanding. Words. Understanding that what he's giving you is rare. Words. That most men never get to the place where they can say, this is who I really am, and I hope it's enough. And when that happens, something sacred is born. Backwards, the relationship transforms from a performance to a practice of presence, practice of compassion, a practice of truth. That's when love becomes real. It sounds backwards. That's when it stops being about what you can get from each other. Backwards. And starts being about what you can grow together. When vulnerability replaces image. Sounds backwards. Love replaces performance. And that is the only kind of love worth waiting for. Words. The love that doesn't just admire your smile, but holds your silence. Words. The love that doesn't just enjoy the date, but stays through the emotional storm. Words. The love that doesn't need constant reassurance because it's built on truth, not tactics. Words. So remember this: if a man is crazy about you and he starts opening up words, you're not just in his heart, you're in his soul. And if you listen carefully, if you hold space, words, if you honor that gift, he will give you more than his time. He'll give you his truth, words. And when a man gives you that, he is no longer just in love. He is home, backwards. And that kind of love, where vulnerability leads, where games die, words, and where truth is the foundation, is the kind of love that doesn't fade. It deepens. It strengthens, endures. When a man is truly, madly, words, and deeply into you, when he's emotionally and psychologically invested in ways that even he can't fully articulate, there is one powerful behavioral shift that often flies under the radar but holds more weight than all the romantic words. He can more weight than all the romantic words he could ever say. Words. He starts planning his future, but not in a way where he asks if you want to be a part of it. No, words. He begins moving as if your presence is already assumed, already integrated, already essential. Words. It's subtle at first. A passing mention of something coming up next season. Casuals. We should go there someday. A reference to how you'd react to something he sees or hears. Words. And you might not even notice it, but what he's doing is embedding you into the narrative of his life. Words. He's not talking about what life could be with you. He's already imagining it as if it's happening backwards. And that distinction is everything, because when a man is crazy about you, words, he doesn't just enjoy being with you now. He starts rewriting the future with your name etched into it, backwards. He begins to make decisions through a lens that includes your opinion, your comfort, and your energy. Words. Whether it's a concert in 5 months or a family event next spring, as backwards. You're not an addition, you're a constant. This psychological shift is not random. Words. It's rooted in one core human truth. People plan long term with what they can't afford to lose. Backwards. A man who's only interested in the present moment or only invested in the excitement of new love, words, doesn't plan that far ahead. He lives in the now because the now is all he's certain of, words. But a man who's emotionally entangled, one who's seriously in love, words, doesn't just want to feel you today. He wants to know you'll be there tomorrow. Backwards. So he starts building tomorrow with you already in it. And it's not theatrical. Backwards. It's not a grand proposal or an official announcement. It's the smaller moments, words, the passing references. The next year will do this. Type phrases that give him away, words. When he sees a couple walking hand in hand through a snowy city and says, words, that'll be us in New York someday. That's not just flirtation, it's vision, backwards. And men don't share that kind of vision with women they don't see as permanent. Backwards. This is how you know the difference between a man who likes you and a man who's crazy about you. One invites you into his weekend. The other builds his future around your presence. But there's more to this than just words. The deeper signal is in how he starts adjusting his priorities. A man who's operating from a place of deep emotional connection begins reconfiguring his life to create space for you. Not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. He starts aligning his goals, not in a way that gives up his dreams, but in a way that includes you in them. He starts thinking, if I take this job in another city, how will it affect us? Or should I introduce her to my family now? Backwards. Or wait for the right moment? Or how can I make this next chapter one where she feels safe, supported, and inspired? These aren't casual thoughts. Backwards. They are structural decisions based on emotional certainty. Because once a man is certain about you, he doesn't gamble with your presence. He makes you part of his foundation. That's when everything begins to shift. And this shift shows up in the way he speaks about commitment. He no longer avoids the subject or treats it like a future inconvenience. Instead, backwards, he talks about it with a quiet kind of confidence, even if he doesn't label it. You'll notice him making you a part of long-term plans without hesitation. If he's planning a trip 6 months out, he doesn't say, I might go to Europe. He says, we should go to Europe. He doesn't ask if you'd still be around. He assumes you will be. Not from arrogance, but from alignment. In his mind, your place in his life is not conditional anymore. Backwards, it's settled. And that's how you know he's serious. Because men who are unsure talk in maybes. They create distance in their language. They leave doors open. Just in case. But men who are all in, pockwards, they start using more than I. They talk in terms of inclusion, not exclusion. Backwards, they make decisions with your presence as a non-negotiable. And here's where the psychological layer deepens. This kind of behavior is not a tactic. It's an instinct. When a man has fallen to that level of emotional depth, when he's bonded to you beyond surface attraction, he doesn't make plans with you. He makes plans around you. Your energy becomes the sun, and the rest of his life begins to orbit. That might sound romantic, but it's actually much more grounded than that, backwards, because what he's really doing is setting up emotional architecture. He's designing a life that you would feel safe in, happy in, fulfilled in. He begins to think of not just what he wants, but what you both need. That's where his masculinity shifts from attraction to devotion. Devotion isn't loud. It's not fireworks. It's quiet consistency. got this handled. You don't have to wonder. I'm already thinking 5 steps ahead to make sure this works. That's when you're no longer dealing with a man who's dating. You're dealing with a man who's building. With the man who's building. Words. And building is the key word, because planning isn't just about scheduling events. It's about vision. A man who's building a life with you starts asking himself hard questions. Am I the kind of man who can give her what she needs? Am I emotionally available enough to sustain her trust? Am I willing to fight for this? Don't appear in Cat's Heart. These questions don't appear in casual relationships. Words. They appear in love, real love. And when those questions start surfacing in him, everything changes. Words. He might get quieter, more reflective. He might start making adjustments to his habits. Words. He might begin surrounding himself with better influences, taking his health more seriously, managing his money with more discipline. These aren't isolated acts. They are reflections of one truth. Backwards, you have become part of his vision. And when a man sees you as part of his future, words, he begins upgrading himself in the present, not because you asked, but because his soul demands it. Words. He wants to be the man your future deserves. And that is a transformation, no motivational speech. Words. No self-help book and no therapist can trigger. Only love can. So what does that mean for you? Words. It means you have to start paying attention to the actions behind the assumptions. Words. Don't just listen to what he says. Watch how he moves. Backwards. Does he ask about your goals and dreams with genuine interest? Words. Does he make decisions that consider your needs without you needing to remind him? Words. Does he invite you to be part of his growth? Not as a cheerleader, but as a partner. Words. Does he speak about the future with your name woven into it like a natural thread? Because if he does, backwards, he's not trying to manipulate you into falling for him. He's showing you that he already fell. Words. And his fall wasn't an accident. It was intentional, gradual, and rooted in respect. Words. This kind of love is rare. That's why so many people miss it. Because it doesn't look like a movie. Backwards. It doesn't come with a spotlight or a dramatic confession. Words. It looks like him booking 2 seats instead of 1. Words. It looks like him remembering that you hate the cold and choosing a warmer getaway. Words. It looks like him planning his weekends around your schedule, not because he's whipped, but because your presence matters that much. Words. It looks like small acts of inclusion that reveal massive emotional investment. And if you're wise, words, you won't dismiss these signs as coincidence. You'll recognize them for what they are. Words. A man declaring without needing to speak it. Words. You're not just a part of my life. You are my life. But let's also talk about fear, words. Because not every man who loves like this announces it confidently. Some men, words. When they start seeing a woman in their future, get terrified. Not because they don't love her, words, but because they realize they've never felt this way before. And that fear can make them hesitate, words, pull back. Not because their love is fading, but because it's getting too real, words. And real love shakes the foundation. If you see a man pull back just as things are getting serious, words, don't immediately assume he's gone. Watch how he returns. If he comes back with more clarity, more consistency, more intentionality, he's not confused. He just needed a second to breathe, words. The depth of his feelings scared him. But if he comes back with games, mixed signals, or indifference, then he wasn't building, he was browsing, and you deserve more than a man who browses you, words. You deserve a man who's building with you. So let me say this clearly, backwards. A man who's truly crazy about you will not ask for permission to plan the future with you, words. He'll start integrating you into it naturally because in his heart you already belong there, words. He'll talk about we, not because he's trying to impress you, words, but because he doesn't know how to think in I anymore. That's the shift, words. That's the moment the relationship becomes something deeper, something sacred, backwards, something that doesn't need validation from the world because it's built on mutual inclusion, words. And once you experience that, you'll never again settle for surface level interest, words. You'll never again chase a man who makes you guess backwards. Because now you know what it looks like when a man plans his life with you instead of around you, backwards. So if you're in a space right now wondering, words, does he really want a future with me? Stop waiting for the grand gesture. Look at his patterns, words. Is he making space for you, not just in his calendar, but in his choices? Is he speaking about next month, words, next season, next year, and placing you right there beside him, words? Is he evolving into a version of himself that aligns with your values, your growth, and your vision, words? If he is, then you're not just dating, you're being chosen over and over again in a quiet, words, consistent, deeply intentional way. That's not fantasy. That's real love, backwards. Backwards, that's how a man shows he's not just in the moment with you. He's already walking into the future holding your hand, even when you haven't reached for it yet.